This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, June 2nd. I'm Caitlin Sheik, the Councilwoman for District 2 and Chair of Longbrook Park Commission. It is 7:03. I am officially going to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of our meeting from May. Is there a motion to accept the minutes before?
Bill Pearl, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay, I saw Martha's hand first. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? No, seeing none. All in favor of approving the minutes?
All right.
Motion carries unanimously. All right. Moving on to our second item on the agenda. We have an update from our Superintendent of Parks and Rec, Mr. Esposito. You have the floor, sir.
Hi, Chad Esposito. How is everybody doing? Park Superintendent for the town of Stratford. I have just the conservation report and my report. So I'll give Kelly's report because it's short and sweet. And then we could go to parks and then I could field any questions. The Solitude Company will begin pond treatments this week. Kelly finally got in touch with them, so they're scheduled to be here this week or this coming week to start doing the pond treatments on the upper pond and I guess lower pond. Trees within the vicinity of the dam are being scheduled for removal with our contractor, Razor's Edge. So she's working with them to solidify dates and which ones need to be removed and all of that stuff. Signs regarding the waterfowl are installed. There's one up on Marcus Drive, kind of in the corner wedged between two sidewalks so that it's visible for walkers. And then down at the lower pond, it's behind a concrete pad where a bench is going to be, a bench was there, but a bench is going to be reinstalled. So once the bench is there, it kind of goes with the theme and the motif, but for right now, it's just on a 4x4 post behind that. So it's kind of in the area where most people hang out by the playgrounds and the splash park. So it's very prominent with people walking around and stuff. So that's her report. That's what I got from her. If there's any questions, I could direct them to her. If I could answer them myself, I could answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Esposito. I guess my question is, in terms of the Solitude, the treatment for the pond, the waterways, is that going to be every month, like once a month, they'll be administering treatment to the ponds?
I could certainly ask Kelly. I don't know what the treatment schedule was because I wasn't part of the bid or the process, so I can answer or ask her to send you something. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. I'm just glad this year, obviously deep, everything else is up and operating appropriately. So I'm glad that that's starting in June.
Yes. Okay. So on the park side, I sent you a quick report and all that stuff, but I realized that I put April because we were in May. These should have said May. I don't know. I guess I got confused with the date when I sent it over. So mowing, string trimming, park staff mowed and trimmed the park a total of 5 times in the month of April. The grass is growing out of control, with another 2.75 or 3 inches over this past weekend and 80-degree weather, 90-degree weather. So we're still on catch up on all properties, Longbrook Park included, all schools. Schools are starting to get into their picnics and graduation. So I have a list, 2-page list from Board of Education, as well as every park and every town-owned property that we own. So we'll get to it. We talk to everybody and we'll get to it. The garbage removal collection, park staff is in the park area to collect garbage out of the many cans spaced around the property. The second shift continues to check the cut through the woods at the end of Laughlin Road East and East Parkway. They still go through there, about once a week now. And there's always garbage in that area. So we're trying to do the best that we can. Sports and permits, between in April and in May, with all the high school teams and the organization of recreational sports, Pendersfield was used tremendously, basically 7 days a week. Sundays all day, and then high school pretty much monopolizes Monday through Saturday. Now that high school sports are kind of calming down, we get some of the breaks and stuff like that that the field isn't being used as much. Sundays are permitted to local Straffle teams such as PAL, baseball teams and soccer organizations, Sterling House and those people. The splash pad was turned on and made operational on 5/24. There were a couple, it turns on daily. It runs from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and it's on a timer. So during those times, if you touch the sensor, the splash pad works. When in off hours, it cuts the power to the splash pad, so you can't use it, in the middle of the night, let's say. It runs for 15 minutes, and then after 15 minutes, if the sensor's not touched, then it shuts down. Obviously, the warmer it gets, the busier it is. It runs constantly. The splash pad, I have some facts about the splash pad. Years ago, when we put that splash pad in, we could have went with a filtering system that would have put chlorine into the water. We chose not that system. So two things happened with that. One, it would have been a recirculating water and chlorine that we would have had to watch the chlorine of the water with 2 to 5 year olds. Number two, we chose a drainage type system. So as the water runs, when it goes into the surface drain, it drains into the lower pond. So we kind of get, in the summer months, we're getting constant additions of fresh water into the lower pond. That hurts, because if chlorine was running through the splash pad, obviously it would cut down on fungus and black mold, but we're not chlorinating the water. So building maintenance, I know that was one of the questions coming up. Building maintenance has a 2-week cleaning schedule where they power wash the blue pad or the blue rubber every 2 weeks. They wash everything before it opens up at 8 a.m., especially as school gets out and camps get in. They get in there before the campers even come down. They use obviously all non-toxic chemicals that are safe for water, fish, fowl, because it goes into the water. So that's our cleaning schedule, and building maintenance handles that division or handles that duty. Then tick mosquito sprays. I know there was a question about, do we spray parks for ticks and mosquitoes? No, we don't. The area is extremely vast. So I've never really gotten a quote to spray every acre or square foot of parks, but I would imagine it's astronomical. Kelly does mosquito dunks. They put mosquito dunks in all of our catch basins, and that usually happens right around now or the fall. So I have to follow up with her on, we contract all habitat services to do that. So I don't know what the timeline is, but I can certainly ask her of when that's going to be done. Well, then the last and most prominent is the post-tension tennis courts. I know Carol put it on the the draft copy of the engineering plans from Mylone McBroom. I could answer any questions if anybody has any questions about the rendering, but it is a side-by-side court. Some trees do have to be removed. The batting cage does have to be moved, and we're going to limit as much as possible to take just what's needed. The stage that we're in now is we've given, the draft copy was accepted. I presented to this committee. I presented to the Parks and Rec tomorrow night. So if we have a continuation or a favorable recommendation from both of your commissions, then we move forward. And what the next plan is Mylone McBroom has to come on site. We have to do some test holes, some test digs to see what the soil composition is, and if anything is needed to help make the base, good for the courts and all of that stuff. And then if it's favorable, we'll keep moving, and that gives them the ability to go out to bid, or we're working with 2 or 3 companies that are state bid list, Sourcewell and NJPA, all bid consortiums that municipalities use. So we're going to go out to these to avoid the bid process because they've already gone to bid for this type of work. And we could pick and choose and who gives the best price and the product and all of that stuff. So that's where we stand right now with the projects that we're working on. And I know there's some other questions about it, but we could deal with that later, or I could talk about it now, either way.
Thank you, Mr. Esposito. I'm just going to ask anybody who's not, there's a lot of background noise. If you're not speaking, to please just mute your screen or mute your phone or tablet. I'm going to go back to the splash pad. I gotten a couple emails inquiring about the splash pad and the cleaning of the site. So from what I'm hearing, is it possible that we can have it, cleaned or whatever that process is once a week with such heavy activity? Is that a possibility instead of every 2 weeks?
I mean, I could send the request to Danny and building maintenance, and what they found is in that 2 weeks, it's the sweet spot. So I could certainly ask to him and see if it could be increased weekly if needed, if they're seeing more black mold or whatever the case is. Sure, absolutely.
Okay, great. And then does anyone else have any other questions regarding the splash pad for Mr. Esposito? Okay, and then my second question is also a follow-up to an email I got from a resident here. There is concern from parents who are going down to the Vicky Soto playground, and because some of the trees there were removed, the playground is no longer shaded. So the concern is the temperature of the actual playground being so hot that the kids aren't able to sit on the slide or sit on the swings. So I believe I forwarded that to you. If it's possible for the town to construct some type of a canopy to be over the actual playground itself, I guess plural because there's two down there, but it's primarily the Vicky Soto, which is out roasting in the sun for a lot longer than it used to be with sun exposure and heat.
So this was, to answer a question, we've looked at this actually, ironically, we looked at it before we put the netting up to protect from foul balls. We looked at a canopy type, pavilion type sailed structure to cover so that a ball wouldn't land on the children. And with the size of the playground and the splash park, it was tens of thousands of dollars to cover the structure because it's about 70 feet wide, 70 feet in width or depth, about 100 and something feet wide, and it would have been a massive, massive structure to protect those areas. So we looked at that, and then I looked at smaller structures too. Once we decided to go with the net to kind of protect the foul balls, we did look at structures because there were playgrounds, like in Keller responded, which I could adhere to because I was here 2-3 years ago. There were some awful trees, and me as a certified playground inspector, I was far more concerned about the health of the trees and branches losing in a playground area compared to the sun. I have a temperature gauge. I go out and check playgrounds in the summertime periodically. The most notable playground I check probably the most often is the one down at Short Beach because there is no shade there, zero. And I have never seen the slides get to 120 degrees. Maybe in the metal slides back in the 80s, but plastic has a way of dissipating the heat a little bit better. They do get hot. They do get hot. But if that were to come to it, then I would shut down the playground or at least make it my recommendation that kids shouldn't go on it. So there is a smaller shade type, and I looked at small shades, and a shade that is 20 feet wide by 30 feet long by 8 foot high is about 15 to 20 grand. So again, it's tens of thousands of dollars to create a shade structure, which obviously we don't have built in our budget now. But if we were to look towards the future or plant more trees, in the area so that the trees get mature and create more shade with better varieties of trees that are going to last longer and down in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Esposito. Our capital, our CIP budget, improvement budget has not been approved yet. So, I mean, it's worth, I'm happy, I'm sure Councilor Furlow, who's on here, can inquire just because this is an issue that parents are questioning, advocating for, and it is a change. And I hear you 200%. We don't want to have, dead trees or limbs, God forbid, coming down on anybody who's walking the park or enjoying the park. But if it's the smaller canopy that's more in reach for us, if it's possible, are there any playgrounds that have any type of canopy or structure on
No, I mean, if you look at the Victoria Soda Playground, and I don't have an aerial footage, I took it, but I don't really know how to add things. If you look at, or just by visual memory, on each platform, there is a rooftop canopy that creates shade. So if the kids are hanging in the playground or maneuvering around the ramps and the playgrounds and the walkways, the landing areas have shade. So that's even different than Short Beach, because Short Beach has no landings because of the hurricane and the 190 mile an hour hurricane proof structure. There's no sails down at Short Beach. So like most of the playgrounds that we put up now have some type of shading so that kids can find refuge or shade in the playground structure and go to an area. So that's kind of way that they're designed and built. That's how we looked at it, because we looked at covering, there was some concerns about the Splash Park too. It's made for 2 to 5 year olds, it's in the element. We looked at a substructure there, like I say, trying to extend out, and it's very, very, very expensive. To the tune of multi-tens of thousands of dollars. So if it's something that, it becomes a priority or move forward, if you move back towards the bridge, there are picnic tables and stone structures that are in the shade in the property. So, if parents had to, they can, retreat back to the shady area or to where trees are and remove themselves from the sun. That's kind of the way that it was built and designed. So that's what, we don't really have any shade structures at any playgrounds, no.
Mr. Esposito, would you be available just to write, essentially what you just said, of small structure versus the larger structure that you had described, and the price point of what that would, like, in a ballpark range, possibly be, and then to your point, my feeling is this is not going to be an issue or concern that gets smaller as we get into summer, just so we have, some type of a collective response. And then again, with CIP coming, we can always try, we can always offer. And then in moving forward, perhaps next year's budget, that's something that we could anticipate or try and plan for. But I appreciate your comments. Martha, did you want to ask a question or make a comment about the playground?
Well, I did actually have a couple of comments because we go to the playgrounds often. And for some reason, like Short Beach, the breeze or whatever, it doesn't really get hot, which always blows my mind because it doesn't seem to get hot like Vicky Soto Park does. But there's also so many slides that there's always one not in the sun, so because there's slides on all different sides. So if you're hoping they're with an adult who can be like, ooh, that one's hot, go to the, there's one on the other side that's going to be in the shade because the sun's not there. So that's just kind of my thing. Like, it's like a fact of life that playgrounds get hot, right? And it's part of their learning process that they don't want to go down to a hot slide. Sorry, I'm being negative. So it does get hot, but there's full slides. Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions about the playground before we move the discussion about the tennis courts? Mr. McGuire, did you want to say something? Oh, hold on. Hold on.
Sign up. Pardon?
Go ahead.
Did the town put that sign up?
We couldn't hear what you said in the beginning. Could you repeat your question or comment?
Okay, yeah, Chad, there's a new sign. And I was wondering if the town put the sign up.
I'm sorry, you broke up again right as you described the sign.
Yeah, well, there's a sign on the pond. And I was wondering if the town actually put it there.
Describing the waterfowl?
Yes.
Yes? Yeah.
It's telling the people not to feed them. Okay.
Yes, we had put those two signs up, one at Marcus Drive on the upper pond and one in the lower pond area right near the bench. Yes.
Okay, no problem.
Mr. McGuire, just to follow up on that, we had gotten for the last several months, inquiries regarding the signs that are. Oh, who's that? Sorry. Hold on. I had received, and I don't know if Mr. Perillo had also, an inquiry regarding signs and if we had signs, and some people didn't know that we already had signs. The town had signs posted along Brewster regarding, the fishing ordinances that we have in town, or not to feed the animals. And I had asked Kelly a few months ago, if we could update the signs just to be more educational, and that was in the same vein of the community outreach education that her department was going to provide for residents within a certain vicinity of the waterways here. And she had said that when she had gone into into the public works storage, that she had found those signs. So I had asked her if she felt that they were educational and appropriate, if they could be put up around the pond or waterways rather. And I'm glad that they're up. Do we approve of the signs? Are people okay with them? Does anyone have any feedback or questions or comments regarding, everyone on the commission should have received the email with the attachments that Mr. Esposito had provided to us regarding the tennis courts? Martha, Roger, Jim?
If I could explain it quickly, so what we're looking at is we're looking at doing a post-tension concrete. So that would be the base bid, is a post-tension concrete, not asphalt, not anything like that. It's what we did at Benell and Flood and Cloverfield and stuff like that with the basketball courts. It's bulletproof and amazing how good it works. So what the alternates would be is any kind of lighting or that kind of stuff. So the base bid is the site work, the removal of the trees, the removal and the repositioning of the batting cage, the post-tension concrete, all of the fencing, the painting in Stratford High colors, because that would be their home court where they would play tennis. So all of that is included in the base bid. So the only add alternate that we were thinking of is a light system. So depending on where we came in budget for that base bid project would either push us towards, accepting the lighting as an alternate or passing on the lighting as an alternate.
Chad, as far as the lighting, is that going to negatively affect the homes on Prim Street?
No, so I don't know if you've seen Benell's lighting and Benell's baseball lighting yet. So the new LED lights have zero migration of light. So when you're standing on, let's say, the fence side or on Prim Street, you will see no leakage of light at all. So the LEDs are focused and concentrated on the tennis courts. So
Okay.
literally you would just see if you're on the tennis courts, it would be bright as day. If you're off the tennis courts, it would be black as night. It's the new lighting and technology. And I invite everybody to try and get up to Bunnell to try and watch, see how it is. It's unbelievable. Like the luminance that are in the court and then no leakage outside. So that's one of the things. Obviously, it would be the newest technology. It can be controlled. It would be controlled by a cell phone. It could be controlled by a timer. So there's different ways to look at lighting systems in those areas. You could run it, if Stratford High is going to practice, you could run it at 25% capacity. If they're going to have a match, you could run it at 100% capacity. So it's variable, and it's an incredible system on how controlled and precise it is.
And forgive me, but how much was the cost on that?
That's what we don't know yet.
Oh,
So
okay.
all of this has to go out to bid, and then we'll get, well, it either has to go out to bid or it has to go to CREC or Sourcewell or state bid contract, because then, the companies that we work with will give us a price for the installation in the courts, and then a secondary price as an alternate for the lighting. And if the courts come in or come into our budget number, then we can't pursue the lighting. If it comes under budget and we can pursue the lighting, then, we could do the project. So it's not at that point yet. It still has to be finalized, has to be approved by both commissions, obviously. And then once the bid is final, or once the paperwork is final from Milo McBroom, then it starts getting passed around to, state bid contract companies and other Sourcewell type companies. So we have a competitive look at somebody's, project costs, which will help us.
Thank you.
Mr. Esposito, I have a couple questions. Surprise.
Caitlin, Phil Perillo.
Go ahead.
I just want to talk about the lighting for a second. Not necessarily comment, but I know that listening to some of the building needs meetings in the past with Bunnell, they started the project, and I'm wondering if we don't get the lights this year, would it be more of an expense if we don't fit it to get them in the future, or should we at least fit them and then get the lights later for the electricians or any underground work?
Well, it's an excellent question. So what they did at Bunnell is they were going to put in the bases for the lights. So that's something that we can incorporate in our scope of project too, have the bases. And if it has to wait, a season or another CIP year or round or whatever, then yes. So we would do it, if it's going to have to go to the public, it's going to have to go to members of, Pender's area. And if the residents are an overwhelming no and it gets shot down, then obviously we won't pursue the lights. If the if the residents are okay, we're fine with it because of new technology and all of that stuff, or maybe they're not on every night, or who knows, at that point, and we can't afford a full light system, then they could probably break it down and say how much are the bases and all that stuff. So yes, we can obviously pursue different phases of it to fit our budget numbers.
Thank you.
I'm somewhat familiar with these LED lights, and as you said before, Chad, about the cutoff from where where they're visible and usable to where they're not is just absolutely amazing. So it sounds like a good plan to me.
Yeah, I mean, Bunnell had to put rear-facing lights because it was so dark for pathways and walkways that literally it was like night and day difference. So they had to do backlighting to illuminate certain areas where they needed to. It's crazy. So I mean, if that's what we're looking at, and that's where we stand. if you are all in favor of it and all that stuff, then I could push it to, the next commission, and, we could continue moving on the path. If there's any revisions, anything that you all could think of, I could certainly pass it along to the engineer.
I have a couple questions. So with the email that you sent, which was distributed to the commission members, with this plan, so the batting cage will be moved, is that correct?
Correct,
And
yes.
what about the paddle ball courts?
So the location or the way that this is set, it does not, the paddle court stays exactly where it is.
Okay.
And the trees around the paddle court on the backside of the existing courts now are not touched. Some of the trees to the left of the courts where the second courts will be added, in a side-by-side kind of offset motion behind the building, a couple of those trees will have to be removed. But in removing those trees, Kelly and I had already talked about replanting trees in that area as kind of a natural succession. If we're losing a couple trees, we'll plant a couple trees in that open area so that there's rejuvenation. And yes, the batting cage has to be disassembled and then moved to the other side of the field house, which we've talked with Stratford High. I talked with Mickey Buckmere, talked with Anthony D'Angelo, the AD. They were completely fine with it. They were actually more excited because instead of being buried behind the building, now they actually have a shorter walk to it. It's more accessible. It's near their locker room, so people could use it more. So they were actually very in favor of it. And that would all be part of the base bid of that movement to a different location. And, because we had looked at doing the courts, instead of a side-by-side, we looked to, a north to south or a linear down Prim Street, and it was rock, and the paddle court had to be moved. More trees had to be taken out. So this location and this arrangement really fits the best terrain for the area and for the complex, if you want to call it. So I'm very comfortable with it. I liked it. I chose it immediately. We talked with the engineers. They liked it just for the sake of what had to be done. On the site work, it's pretty much all flat in that area. No real rock, no real anything to deal with. And moving a batting cage is certainly a lot easier than moving a paddle court and electricity, because there's electricity in that area too.
And in this plan, is there planning for spectators for seating? I'm looking at it and I don't see that. So in anticipation of, parents and teams and whatnot, is that an additional thing?
Yeah,
that
so
would be
along Prim Street, you have that natural hillside, which creates kind of a visible. And then on the back side, we could obviously, I didn't think of that, but we could obviously incorporate bleachers, some 3-tier bleachers on the backside courts that would be make available for seating for high school matches and all of that stuff. Yes, excellent. I didn't even think of that. So we could incorporate that as part of the base bid and incorporate 3 benches or 4 benches on that backside so that there's spectators spots to sit around the court.
Well, I'm thinking about it, yes, as potentially wanting to observe like your son or daughter, in their match and what have you, or neighbors, however the space is utilized. But then I'm also thinking about the public safety issues with the activity in the park and that particular area of being, a potential cluster of where after hours people would be unfortunately spending time in the park. So Mr. Ciccarelli is on here, so I don't know if he wants to weigh in on it, but just as a concern, because, and then my last question, if what would the timeline be for this project? Roughly.
That's a very good question. I can't answer it to a T, but if this gets approved with these 2 commissions, and then on our side, we have to go for an 824 review in planning and zoning because there's an existing structure. We're just modifying the existing structure. So that planning and zoning, whenever that meeting would go, once the documents are finalized, so that could be reviewed by planning and zoning, then it would go, then we have to find a contract and all that stuff. So we're hoping as soon as possible, but it looks like maybe early to midsummer mid to late summer, when we get everything in a row and we have everything done. I could, once this meeting, and if you guys agree with this, and then Park and Rec agrees with this, and then we go back to Milo and McBroom and say, look, we have finalization. When are the final plans going to be ready? Then we could start to dictate, from our engineers, the timeline, because they will develop the timeline to a T and follow it, because it's up to them to present the 824, to present this, to pick the contractors and move forward. So once that timeline was established, I could obviously, provide it to each commission so that everybody's in the loop.
And then to your point, there would be a public comment on, the construction. And then of course, I'm sure the concern is going to be noise. So I would hope and request that there would be some type of sound barriers, especially for those that are living along Prim, because of the level of noise. And then my next question would be, potential vibrational ground issues for all of those residents there, to take out the current structure that's there, and then to literally lay the groundwork to then put the new structure in. So just forecasting. However, we can make this as transparent and inclusive as possible. That's my position. So is there any other question or discussion for Mr. Esposito? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have one more.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Esposito.
Oh, no, go ahead. If it's something I can answer now, go ahead.
Yeah, Jed, did he still have the old bleachers that were on the field down there? Could they move one of those over?
We actually removed all the bleachers from over there because of the kid hangouts, and
Oh, yeah.
they were saved for some reason to put on the turf at Penders Field, which was never going to happen. They're
Right.
too heavy. We can't move them. So we hung on to them for a while because we thought we were going to reuse them somewhere, but they're just too large and there was no home for them, so we removed them.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to talk about the splash pad about one more thing. I did see a question about about a gate lock.
Mhm.
So there is a backstory to this. Years ago, when it was a wading pool, there was an actual spring lock on it because obviously you didn't want a 2 to 5 year old to walk in there, get stuck in the pool, and obviously, we know what could happen. So there was a spring lock on it. When we transitioned to the splash pad, which again was a 2 to 5 year old, but it changed into a non, threatening hazard as far as drowning. We kept that lock system. A child was hurt, was hit with the gate, was knocked to the ground. Another child got their hands caught in it. So then it was, please remove the lock. By other Longbrook Park commissions, please remove the spring. We just want the lock. So then we had a pool type lock. That same thing, you would pull it up like any residential pool. You would pull it up, it would release the gate. There was no spring to it. Then another child or parents would complain that my child hits it or the door slides open or whatever the case is. So we removed that lock and just had a freestanding lock that could be shut, which creates the barrier, but there's no mechanism on it that would entrap a child, I guess, if you want to say. So that what was chose probably about 3 years ago, and we've had it ever since. We do get an occasional question here and there, how come my child could get out? It was always superseded by, I don't want my child to get stuck in a gate. So we made it as light as possible so that a child could push it without getting stuck, and have no, clicking mechanism where a hand would get stuck or a foot or whatever the case is, a head. So that's why, it's chose the way that it is.
Someone had called in. Did you have any questions for Mr. Esposito regarding the tennis courts or the splash pad? No? Okay. So oh, go ahead, Martha.
Sorry. How about non-residents using the splash pad? We used to have to sign in for the wading pool and stuff. Just curious about, because of course I'm down there often, and 9 times out of 10, everyone I meet doesn't even live in the town of Stratford. curious if there's a way to patrol that or what we do.
If you want me to field this, there is no way to patrol it. And yes, 90% of probably the people aren't from Stratford. It's an attractive park, obviously, with a splash pad for 2 to 5 year olds and a playground right next to it, and a 2 to 5 playground and a 5 to 12 playground. There's a variance of people. So there's no way to obviously collect or check for residencies or permits or residency passes. So it's just something that we deal with.
Yeah.
So I believe Mr. Esposito is looking for a motion to accept the proposed Longbrook Park tennis courts as presented to us.
I would move
Bill
that.
Pearl, yeah, go ahead, Roger.
Okay, I would move that we accept Chad's proposal and get this moving ahead from our point of view.
I second that.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of accept, I'm sorry, I'm really tired, of accepting and approving the proposal of the Longbrook tennis court?
Aye.
Aye, I approve.
Okay. Chair votes aye, motion passes. Are there any nays? No nays, okay. Motion passes 4-0. So now this is going to go to Parks and Rec, and Parks and Rec, that they also give a vote of recommendation to then be sent off to the next step. I guess we'll be meeting again in July. Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Mr. Esposito, and if you could please, like I said, if there's some type of summation for the splash pads that then we could circulate, have available for parents in their inquiry, that would be very helpful. Next on the agenda, we're going to be moving on to our Director of Public Safety report. Mr. Ciccarelli, you have the floor, sir.
Oh, thank you, Councilwoman Shake. Good evening, Larry Ciccarelli, Director of Public Safety for the illustrious town of Stratford. And just a couple comments on your discussion with Chad regarding, in particular, population shift. And it's just an important comment, not necessarily something we need to address necessarily, but since in particular with the pandemic event, there's been a tremendous shift of population, in particularly from New York and New Jersey up into Fairfield County. This is things that I deal with on the region committees I'm on with Homeland Security. And you see it tremendously in the traffic patterns now. You have crazy traffic patterns because you have people that have homes now in Connecticut, but still have some homes in New York because of either family dynamics or work dynamics, but because of a need to, their perception or need to leave the larger city, they moved out, not necessarily lock, stock, and barrel, but enough to have a secondary home out in Connecticut. And this has just created a bunch of unique traffic patterns, as well as a lot of people in the community. You'll see a lot of New York and New Jersey license plates, as well as you see people that you've never seen before. Now, we don't know if that's going to settle, if eventually they will assimilate into our population, or it's transient and it will reverse back after the pandemic is cleared. But it's just something for all to be aware of. And it's going to be very difficult moving forward for open air type of facilities and open air types of attributes in the community to manage that on a only community basis use when you have this new type of traffic flow and population flow. It's something that will have to be addressed for everything. And this has happened to be one of the first cases that we have seen. When we get back to my report, I'll talk a little bit about public safety issues, and I'll bring up the project I'm working on with the cameras. So number one is on the public safety issues. We've had 18 type of incidents in May of 2021. Out of those 18 incidents, 10 were writing checks. So as I mentioned, that we have more of a defined patrol mechanism in the area. And part of that patrol mechanism is to get out of your vehicle, check buildings, and particularly late at night, just to check for any kind of vandalism, breaking in, anything like that. So anytime that is executed or a officer leaves a vehicle or executes a task, a card is cut, and those are writing checks. There's probably more than 10. It's just the ones that we've actually had defined through reporting mechanism with dispatch. Out of the other 8, most of them were very minor except for 2 instances. One was a defined complaint regarding bicycles in the area that had to be directed specifically with a patrolman. And the other was kids hanging on the snack shack at the Penders Field. That unfortunately there was a little vandalism on that shack. There were some cameras that the school system used on the shack that were damaged, and that was the other call, which unfortunately does happen. So there was a traffic violation or 2 in the area, but at least as of right now, based on the calls that we received or calls that we've executed, things have been still considered very minor in that area. Now, that's not going to last. Warmer weather happens, particularly in July and August, because we still have a variance in the weather right now, patterns. We've had a day in the 50s and another day in the 70s. So as the weather gets warmer at night and kids stay out more late at night, we may see more problems, and hence that's why we're talking about the camera system. Now, I have to admit, I've been out the last 2 weeks. We unfortunately had a family situation, and I missed a couple meetings that we're supposed to have with the camera crews, but I'll give you as much of the update as we have right now. We're looking at 3 different products from 3 different providers. We've narrowed down the type of camera we need, which unfortunately is more expensive. Dealing with working with my forensic guys in the detective's office, realized the only way to execute a plausible camera in a wooden park environment is to have a color camera. Because once you have those standard black and whites, which are cheaper, which might be viable in a more well-lit area, you need a color camera in order to identify colors of somebody's jackets or pants or skin color or something to define if someone does something in that area. And it's very hard to pick that out with a black and white camera. We've also identified certain areas within the park that will need an LPR, license plate reader, because there is traffic that flows through the intersection of the Penders Field area with the secondary training area where the locker room is there, the football locker room. We also looking at options to handle storage, internet, as well as electricity, and that's being worked on and plotted right now with the vendors to give a couple different options, as well as camera placement with camera range and camera coverage. Obviously, a wider coverage camera would be more expensive, but may require less cameras in that area in order to be able to get the coverage necessary. I think that might be what we're looking at the pond area, because of the unique nature of that pond that will be have a camera area. A side and ancillary benefit of cameras in those areas may help to some degree the residents of that area, but just remember those cameras will be pointing into the park. So there'll be, some ancillary benefit to the community, but it mostly will be pond specific. The training area is the most problematic. We've identified, electrical sources in that locker room building to use. We're trying to work out some storage possibilities now that may take some additional cameras because of the rectangular nature of that field, and then that small park area that we're concerned about. Trying to find some camera work in there because that's a trap area. I know Councilwoman Shake talked about, people coming in late at night and hanging out in there, and we want to try to get a camera in there to be able to pick up that gap area. That's late at night you get the kids in there. It's a perfect. It's dark. There's no ambient light. It's an important area to get some camera. The athletic fields are more standard. It's more of a rectangular area. We have more structures to place it on, everywhere from the shack itself to the stadium, to the ball fields. And those we're looking at now is to probably get as many 180 view cameras as possible and have them interlocking so that the full fields are covered. So, from a complete camera selection, we're talking anywhere from 8 to 16 cameras based on what we can utilize, the breadth of that camera, the quality of that camera, and any kind of storage issues that we have. Well, next month I'll have a more defined breakdown of the cameras with the locations. I apologize, I didn't have it this month, but unfortunately I was out. But next month I will have that, including more of a defined pricing. These camera prices all over the place. Everybody's trying to sell you something, the next greatest thing. So we're trying to be very cautious about that. This is a one-time shot to do and get this right. I don't want to have a camera up there and then I have to go look at one of my detectives and they're telling me, Larry, I have no idea who that is, and I can't see that person. So we're it's taking a little bit longer than necessary, I would think, for a project like this, but we're trying to get it right. So that's kind of the overview at 10,000 foot. So any questions on that?
Sounds good.
Mr. Ciccarelli, I just want to say thank you because this has been an ongoing request or inquiry for really since I've been chair of this commission. And, it's unfortunate that we've had an increase. Yesterday, there were people lighting legit fireworks off in the middle of the park and near Penders Field. So it's early to have, that level of activity, because I hear you on July and August usually being the primary time. But at least, we're moving in a direction where we're going to have some type of video surveillance so that in real time, you and your team and everyone else who's working in that regard here will be able to follow up and investigate. God forbid we have some type of an event, or if there's a pattern or what have you, and then we can figure out another type of intervention if necessary to keep everybody safe so we can still enjoy the park. So if I'm hearing you, does that mean with not being able to delineate which types of cameras specifically, that it's not possible to make some type of a request for CIP in like a projected number?
No, I think that we can get a projected number because we pretty much honed into the type of camera we need. So I think that within the next week or the week after, I probably can get a fairly firm number. I wanted to have it for today, but unfortunately I couldn't do it. But yeah, we're pretty close to that. I do know it's very interesting. One of the reasons why this was never done, it sounds a lot easier than it really is to do it. And I'm sure that's why it hadn't been done in the past. It's not defined rectangular structure that you can just, put up cameras in a corner and get them to work. And also you got ambient light issues with a park. So, it's and you got internet issues and you got electrical issues. So it's a little bit more complex. And everybody you talk to has different recommendations. So you have to balance all the different vendors that you see. And each vendor, you have to do anywhere from 1 to 3 walkthroughs in a park. So, you got, each walkthrough is, 2 to 4 hours. So it takes a little time.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we're moving in a direction of progress, so
Mhm.
that makes me happy. And we appreciate, the thoughtful consideration and planning process on public safety's end and your end for helping move this, so to speak, down the field, for lack of a better word. And then also, to your point, the increase in patrolling in the random hours, not set times, just to kind of monitor what's happening. The only thing I can really say is that I have noticed that there's been, I don't want to jinx it, but somewhat of a decrease recently of activity. And even like, coming home from work tonight, there was a patrol car on Prim and Glendale. And, normally that's not the case. So I do absolutely think that the presence of having, our police force there does make a difference, and we appreciate it, and the residents appreciate it also. So thank you. And it looks like July is going to be a busy meeting. I was thinking maybe we take a little break, but it doesn't sound like we're going to do that. So my next question, just before moving on to new business, because we have Mr. Ciccarelli and Mr. Esposito, the reason why I called for a virtual meeting is because if we had done this in person, it wasn't a guarantee that we would all be able to be present to get the reports directly from certain personnel or any personnel really within town hall. And for us and the work and ideas and feedback and progress that this commission has been making, really repeatedly, it requires to have the presence of our directors for certain town departments to be present to answer questions and clarify. So my question for you and Mr. Esposito, and I don't know if Kelly or Ms. Kerrigan will be available for July, but if we were to host a meeting in person, 7 o'clock, in town hall, would you be able to attend? And if not, be honest, that's okay. If we can do this virtually so we can address the follow-up issues that we need to discuss.
I can. My wife, like you, is an ICU nurse, and she works midnights or PM, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So if I got childcare for my daughter, absolutely. The only time I wouldn't be able to, if I'm on vacation, but I would give, Renee a heads up, and then she would pick somebody to go in my place or whatever the case is. So no, I don't mind meeting in town hall at all. Actually, the first Parks and Rec meeting tomorrow night is across the street from my house at Booth. So I'm looking forward to that, actually, to be outside and, away from the cameras. Yeah.
Good answer, Chad. I myself is fine with that. It's part of my job. I don't have any problem coming in. I mean, I spent all day yesterday, today in room 213 doing interviews for a deputy fire chief position. So I've already been in there with groups, so I'm good. I'm good to go. So it's what the town people pay me for. If I got to be someplace, I'm there.
Okay, great. All right. So then it sounds like we could have an in-person meeting, possibly in town hall, which would make, I'm sure, everybody happy. And then, the possibility after July, if there's a walkthrough for the tennis courts or for the, security system, or just to have an idea if we want to make a request of some kind, if the commission feels that that's something that they would want to participate in, we can set that up as well and do that in person. So I had two things, and unfortunately, I think one of the callers was going to be part of new business, but it's 8 o'clock, and in respect of people's time, does anyone have any new business that they would like to bring up or questions that they have before I start? Nope, nothing. All right. I had reached this past weekend, because we had a washout in town. The mural painting reveal that was supposed to happen down in Short Beach. Everyone is invited to go and participate and be there in person for the kindness campaign. And I had reached out to Karen, and I had just inquired and asked her if they had ever thought about doing anything here in Longbrook Park to be part of that campaign. I think that Short Beach has a very high prevalency of families and residents, and to your point, people from all over coming here to Longbrook to enjoy our beautiful space. So someone had made the suggestion, I think it was the Parks and Rec meeting. I had caught the last meeting online, and Chad, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Someone had made the suggestion of possibly doing some type of mural work from some of our younger residents here on the storage facility area that the Pop Warner uses if they own those trailers, or if they rent them. We have to officially figure that out in order to make that suggestion. But because people are complaining that they are an eyesore, and we have two now instead of one, and that's true. We have that here now in the park. But it's a open, welcoming space for everybody, and there's different ways to magnify that beauty in different expressions. So I'm open to it. If the commission is open to it, we can formally invite them, now that we have an actual full agenda for July, to come and just kind of talk to us. And that'll be in town hall, if that's something that the commission members are open to. So I'm curious for your feedback.
I would be open to it. Just prior to this meeting, I had a meeting with the Arts Commission, and one of the things is any murals that we're involved with, we want an oversight. We want to see it before it started, no matter what age the artist. It's just common sense that you'd have the right of first refusal, if I can put it that way, so that there's nothing inappropriate and that's all I would say. By the way, you were talking about, Caitlin, you were talking about the thing at Short Beach. It's going to be Sunday morning at 11.
Yes,
at Short
sorry,
Beach.
I didn't say that. Thank you, Roger. Yep. So I hope if anyone here is available, that we can all go together to support them, and that would be great. Martha, do you have any feedback or comments regarding?
Nope, I'm good. I'm excited to see what they would draw on there.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think in another past meeting that we had that area off near Laughlin, where it's like the path, really, right, where the kids hang out, because there is graffiti and things in the city of New Haven for trees, like large trees that had unfortunately been vandalized. Their local artistry groups had kind of reclaimed that space or item or object, and they had put paintings on the trees. So I think we had brought that up to Mr. Esposito, but that would be, another potential environmentally friendly, of course, conscious paint would be used. But that could be, another way. or, if we wanted to have some type of painting here on Glendale, right? There could be something on the pavement. There's a lot of different ways to kind of repurpose and reclaim those spaces and have an opportunity. And if it's youth oriented or driven, we have so many creative residents here of all ages that would want to, offer proposals to the commission. And it doesn't have to be something that has to be this summer. It could be, a before school project. It could be an early fall project that we could look forward to and plan. And this would be over the course of the summer. To your point, Roger, we wouldn't just have anybody show up and do like a free drawing, on any item. I wouldn't be in support of that. We could make it a contest. We could do, we could do anything. I think that would be great. So, Mr. McGuire, did you have any feedback you wanted to just add?
Oh, I thought it was be a good idea. Be good to show off the park that way,
Mhm. Okay, great. So we'll add that for the July agenda. And then, the only other thing, Mr. Esposito, since you're here, on the pathways, and to your point, because of the heat and because of the rain and the overgrowth or like increased growth rate, I should say, I'm not gonna say overgrowth, of the shrubs and the grass and what have you. In the springtime, the marsh area or the overgrowth part, which is by the main bridge area, where then it's the large stone wall that kind of goes around. So in the beginning of spring, that was all cut back, and it's just now overgrowing, and it's starting to come up by the walkways. And I'm happy because I'm thinking that the level of the water is still decreased in the ponds because we didn't have severe flooding like we had a few months ago. So that's good. But unfortunately, there is a lot of garbage that's piling up already in those waterways. So when the teams come out and they're doing, I guess, the maintenance work, are they able to get into the waterways to clear some of the garbage, which would then potentially like obstruct like the water gate, for lack of a better word, that's there, so there's not a backup or of pressure or anything?
Yeah, I'll add it to our schedule, our maintenance schedule, and try and get there early next week, and see if we can put it on schedule to clean up, mow that vegetation down and all that stuff. We try and do it like once a month, but it has been a while, so we'll get to it. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I
And
have
then
a quick question for Chad.
Go
At the end of Brewster Street, there's a garbage can, and it used to be the compacting type, but now there's just a regular garbage can, and that can is always overflowing for some reason. We have to call the town on a number of cases. I was wondering if they could put one of the compacting garbage cans back there.
So ironically, I could answer this question because I have knowledge of it. When we had the Big Belly can there, when I looked at heat maps, because I could produce heat maps of where the map, that can never got used. When we put the regular can back in where people could put full bags of garbage, it gets filled immediately.
Right.
So it was kind of a either no garbage, or when we put a can out there, then it's full. So we didn't want to waste the Big Belly because the Big Belly wasn't really being used there because no one was using it. When we had other areas in the heat, I think we moved that Big Belly down to like Pickle Barrel, like on that corner of Stratford Ave and Main Street, and it's used down there great, utilized between those two cornerways. So unfortunately, when we go to that area, we just have to be diligent on picking it up. And the first person that comes with a 25-gallon bag that fills it, and then subsequently when people come to fill it more, then it becomes overflowing because people put their own home garbage in it. They don't want to walk out. They miss their garbage. It's crazy what we see. So yeah, that's the reason why it was removed. If when we go to a leasing and we try and figure out, because we only have 82 units right now, maybe that's something that we can incorporate. Are we going to get more units? Are we going to continue to use the Big Bellies? Are we not? Should we do these outer areas because it will obviously stop the garbage? But it just wouldn't utilize the way that it should have been.
I see.
Maybe Larry's cameras could catch the people putting their household garbage in there.
Hmm.
Just saying.
That's another issue for what happens at the end of some street.
Good thinking, Martha.
Thanks.
But agreed, Martha. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? No. My last question, Mr. Esposito. So there's a significant increase in DPW's budget for flowers and planting. And my question is there anything that you know of in terms of planning for flowers or shrubs to be planted in Longbrook in the upcoming year?
That's a very good question. There was some plans over by that bed by the Flashpad. It's kind of run and over muck, so we were going to do that bed. We were still kind of confused on the area inside Penders if we were going to start doing some more plantings, but most of the planting, the increase is because of town buildings. A lot of town buildings were starting to increase and beautify. So absolutely, I could put together a plan for Longbrook Park. And, you know, with that money, we could definitely beautify certain areas, public areas, and absolutely include it into our square footage. No problem. Absolutely.
Thank you. I think that would be a great addition, you know, to have the support and have DPW out, you know, and part of the upkeep and maintenance, and it would be great. You know, the part by the staircase, so the daffodils and everything that we had planted in the fall along the staircases, it's now overgrown with weeds. So, you know, in the lifespan or process of those daffodils, they have to kind of, you know, be what's the right word? Kind of like you bend them in half, right? And then you tie them so that they then decompensate and the energy goes back into the roots so that they can regenerate for next year.
They just cut them at the base.
Right. So nothing's been cut yet. So my question is, would it be Public Works or Parks and Rec rather that would come out to then mow that whole area? Just it looks like a jungle right now. Even like in front of this staircase where all that mulches, all the weeds have come up through the mulch. So
the grand staircase off of Elk and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that was, you know, part of previous Longbrook commissions that there was going to be a landscaper who took care of the area. So if that landscaper is not taking care of the area, then it's going to have to fall back on Public Works. So we'll reach out to the landscaping company and see why they aren't doing it. And then, yes, that's an area that we can obviously beautify and bring it back to where it needs to be with it. Sure.
Yeah, and I think she moved out of the area. The one
Yeah.
who was doing it.
Yeah, I think she moved to Milford or Shelton, one or the other.
well, we can figure it out. And then, you know, if that ends up being another, I don't know, summertime community outreach project, or if not, and it's something simple so that it's taken care of sooner rather than later, then, you know, on behalf of the commission, I say thank you. And then we can figure out moving forward if that business or person has moved out of Stratford, the long-term maintenance. But, you know, we, as volunteers, we had planted along that staircase there on the outside of the stone area. So whatever you suggest, you know.
Yeah, I'll go take a look at it and come with a maintenance plan, and we'll get over there and clean it all up.
Thank you.
Some of the areas, you know, a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I redid the front of Public Works as the entrance and then resodded everything. Now that the parks and some of the money, the expenditures that we were asking for, now that the parks building on East Main Street has been painted, I'm going to do plantings and remove the 2 dead cherry trees that are back there to make it more inviting on the backside of Public Works along East Main Street. So that's another area that we wanted to increase that, you know, for visibility and sight and beautification for our yard. So that's another area we're going to touch upon and clean up.
That'd be great.
Chad, just just so you know, the one of our art projects on the Arts Commission was to possibly paint a mural on the East Main side of that Public Works building. And that in tonight's discussion appears to be moving forward. So before you do too much, might check with Rich Fredette. He should have a good handle on it.
I mean, either Rich or somebody from the Arts Commission could reach out to Renee and then come up with the whole plans, and then we could work off of her lead. This is the first I've heard of it. I've never heard that before, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, whoever is in charge should reach out to Renee and give her the story, and then we could adjust, obviously, you know.
Okay, great.
All right. Does anyone else have any other new business? All right, seeing none. Our next meeting is going to be held on the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. And for the month of July, it's going to be July 7th. We will be meeting in Town Hall. We'll be posting ahead of time so that the public will have ample time and notice to come join us if they would like to. And we look forward from having Mr. Esposito and Mr. Ciccarelli join us as well. If there's nothing further, if there's a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
Mr.
Second.
McGuire made a motion, Mr. Saul seconded. Okay.
Martha's awake.
Martha's awake. Are all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. This meeting is officially adjourned at 8:19. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging in.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right,
All
everybody.
right,